Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the second session this year, introducing you to some more of the finest Chazanim to grace bimmers outside London. Rabbi Jeffrey Schister's presentation is entitled More Star Chazanim of the Provences. At one time, almost every mainstream regional UK Jewish community employed a cantor, and sadly, many of these excellent Chazanim are now just a distant memory. Tonight, Rabbi Schister will discuss some of these outstanding exponents of the art of Chazanut and play recordings for each of them. The Edgware United Cantoral sessions are presented in association with the European Cantors Association.
Good evening, everybody. First of all, may I say what a pleasure it is to be with you again. This is the second program in this series of Chazanim of the Provences. Before we start, may I make a request, please, that you do not send messages in during the course of the presentation. They're very distracting, and with the greatest of respect, people are not really interested in the fact you heard a particular cousin in 1975. If you really want to make a comment, then you'll be very welcome to, but please wait until we finished. Now, this program is another one which the intention of which is leveling up. As I said in the previous program, the introduction to that, we have this notion that the biggest and the best is always in the capital city. And of course, we know for sure, as far as Chazanim are concerned, that is not necessarily the case. There were indeed some exceedingly fine Chazanim in London, but they were equally fine, in fact, perhaps even some better Chazanim in provincial congregations, and not always where you'd expect, not just in the largest congregations, but sometimes in the slightly smaller communities, as we're going to hear this evening. We're going to be traveling quite a long way around the country. We're going to start actually in Manchester. We're starting with Chazan Solomon Kupfer. Chazan Kupfer was born in Bialowice, near Radom in Poland, in 1881. His father and his brother were both Chazanim. He studied in the cantorial school at Częstochowa, which was founded by famous Chazan Avram Ber Birnbaum in 1907. In 1927, Solomon Kupfer was appointed the Oel Yaakov Synagogue in Leipzig, where he succeeded Chazan Solomon Stern. You may recall that if you watched the previous program, that Chazan Stern came to this country where he became a very celebrated Chazan. With the rise of Nazism, Chazan Kupfer left Leipzig and came to this country and went to Manchester. In 1934, he was appointed Chazan at Manchester's new synagogue on Cheetham Hill Road. This was a much coveted position. A number of great Chazanim had previously held that position. People such as Jacob Matz. I have one of his books. He died in 1913. There was Chazan Isaac Shapiro. I'm fairly confident that this is the same Isaac Shapiro who eventually became the Chazan in the new synagogue, the Egerton Road, a position which I held, of course, many years later. Isaac Shapiro died in 1931. Chazan Leibush Miller was in Manchester New Synagogue. Solomon Pinkasovich. Aaron Elfand, some of you may recall, because he eventually came down to London, where he became the Chazan in Bronstein. Manchester's New Synagogue really was the Mecca in the Provences for Chazanim. Cantor Kupfer held this prestigious post for more than 30 years. He had two daughters, Lola and Anne, and they were both talented pianists. He passed away in 1965 and is buried in Manchester. He was my dear friend Avram Levin's teacher, and Avram Chazan Levin used to stand and sing with him. Here we're going to hear him sing Hashem, Hashem.
Hashem,
Our next cousin is cousin Avram Herman, another Manchester cousin. Avram Herman was born in Frankfurt in Germany in 1930. Fleeing Nazi persecution, the 6-year-old Avram and his family managed to get to Palestine in 1936. At 9 years old, he was a soloist of the great synagogue choir in Haifa. Cousin Herman studied in Yeshivat Kfar Haroer. He joined the Haganah, he fought in the Palmach, and then he fought in the Israeli army, Tzahal, in the years surrounding Israel's 1948 War of Independence. He was awarded a scholarship to the Academy of Music in Tel Aviv, and he was taught by the celebrated Chazan Leibert Lantz. In 1966, he accepted the position of Chazan at the High Crumpsall and High Broughton synagogues in Manchester. And that was a job he remained in for 48 years. It's interesting, I don't remember Cousin Herman singing very much in London. In fact, many of these Chazanim who made names for themselves in the provinces didn't seem to come to the capital very often. On one occasion, I do remember hearing Cousin Herman here was at the Finchley Synagogue, where in those days, the Chazanim Association existed. Unfortunately, for reasons that Spencer's already mentioned earlier, we don't have many Chazanim left in this country. But in London, when I joined as a young man, some 50, 60 years ago, when I joined the Chazanim Association, virtually every shul in London, even if you recall, the district synagogues, not just the constituent synagogues of the United Synagogue and the Federation of Synagogues, even the Adas, all of them had full-time Chazan. We had the Association of Chazanim, and we had a convention. At that convention, we had a Sefirat Omer service. In the afternoon, the Mincha service was conducted by one Chazan, and Avraham Herman conducted the Sefirat Omer service and David Ma'ariv with a synagogue choir, which, if my memory serves correctly, would have been conducted by Jack Rosenberg. He was a very, very fine Chazan, as you will hear, a very, very big voice, a very, very big reputation, and very well loved indeed in Manchester. He died on the 6th of April, 2017. Here we're going to hear him sing Amar Rabbi Elazar.
מרבים שלום העולם. נאמר רבי אלעזר, נאמר רבי חנינא, תלמידי חכמים מרבים שלום בעולם. נאמר בכל בנייך לימודי השם, רב שלום בנייך אל תקרא בנייך נלהלו בנייך. שלום
We now come to a Chazan about whom I can tell you sadly very little. But what I can tell you is that this Chazan holds a very, very special place in my heart. This is Chazan Bronstein. He was the Chazan in Middle Street Shul in Brighton, where I was born. We found a little about him, not very much. He was born in Lithuania on the 8th of January 1920, and he was the son of the Reverend Garbacz Bronstein. I don't know if Reverend Garbacz Bronstein was a Chazan or not. In the 1940s, when he came to this country, Beryl Bronstein's first job was at the Ilford District Synagogue. That's a community, which I'm sure you will know, eventually became one of the very biggest in Europe. He didn't stay there too long. He then came to Brighton and Hove, from 1948, and he stayed there till 1989. That's 42 years. He was Chazan, and he was appointed as emeritus Chazan in that shul. Why does he hold such a special place in my heart? Well, I, my father, and my brother used to go to shul every Shabbos, and we used to listen to him. I was quite entranced by him. More than that, he actually taught me to read Hebrew. He was a teacher in the Cheder of the Middle Street Shul. I suspect he'd be rather surprised hearing my Israeli pronunciation now, because that's certainly not what he taught me. In about 1956, they brought down to the shul a very famous choir master called Louis Shute. Mr. Shute had been the choir master in his time in the Great Synagogue in London. And I actually was fortunate to become a member of that choir. Of course, a very, very junior member of the choir in 1956. Mr. Shute had rather a difficult time. I think he was getting on in years, and some of the boys I remember well did not give him an easy time. Some years later, my wife Anne and I went back down to Brighton, and we actually were able to spend a Shabbat in the shul, and I saw cousin Bronstein, who was absolutely thrilled to see me. I was already studying Chazanut, and he invited me to Daven Musaf, which I did with great, great pleasure. If you haven't seen Middle Street Shul, it is certainly one of the most beautiful buildings, most beautiful shul buildings ever constructed in this country. Sadly, not in use anymore. We're going to hear cousin Bronstein sing what was clearly a private recording. I came upon this by pure chance on a 78 record. He must have gone to a studio where he made a private recording. It doesn't even have any accompaniment, but it's a very beautiful recording. And let's listen now to cousin Beryl Bronstein sing Ana Avda from Brich Shemay.
Величинное кадицу я киверо, величинное кадицу я киверо, оно море потом. Не рамо домо, Петита хлебой белаето, летахлим, мешалим любови, любовь, теплома писарове, L'amor qui te rouait, l'amor qui te rouait, le pauvre le foyer de l'École. Le pauvre, oh, le
As you can see, unfortunately, we were not able to find any pictures of cousin Bronstein. If anybody knows where we can find one, I'd be very appreciative to receive it. I do want to thank Tony Honigberg for the wonderful work he just did there in putting together this lovely slideshow to show you how really beautiful the Middle Street Synagogue is. We now come to another cousin, but this time we're going up to Liverpool. This is a cousin, again, I don't know very much about him, unfortunately, about his life. This is Herman Bornstein. Cousin Bornstein was born in Lodz on the 23rd of October, 1888. He was the cousin in Krakow, the Nozick Synagogue in Warsaw, at Lemberg, and the Rumbach Synagogue in Budapest. He then became Chazan at Princes Road Synagogue, Liverpool, where he stayed from 1955. It's very interesting when you will hear him, because you will realize that he was indeed a very fine Chazan with the tradition, with the Eastern European tradition of Chazanut, something we don't normally associate with the shul with respect, like we would do with Princes Road, or indeed the New West End, which are very similar kinds of communities, rather anglicized in their outlook. But it's very interesting that in this wonderful, if you haven't been to Princes Road, incidentally, I certainly recommend it, but he was a chazan there, a more English kind of shul, but nevertheless, they wanted to have chazanim of tradition, who could sing traditional chazanut, as he could, and in fact, as some of his successors, for example, Moise Katanka, alav shalom, such as people like that could do. He left in 1955 to go to Cannes, but ill health brought him back, and he went to Sale in Manchester, and he died there on the 21st of August in 1967. He's buried at the Broad Green Cemetery in Liverpool. Here we're going to hear him sing Hamachaber Es Haner.
Hamachaber Es Haner, Hamachaber Es Haner, Hamachaber Es Haner, mipnei shehom es yareh, mipnei goyim, mipnei ליסטים מפני רוח המכבה יסנר מפני שהוא מתיורי מפני גויים מפני ליסטים מפני רוח אוי בשביל החוילי אוי בשביל החוילי שיפודות כחוסר הנר כחוסר השמש כחוסר הפסלות היום רבי יויסף פויט בחולו רבי יויסף פויט בחולו חוץ מן הפתירו רבי יויסף פויט בחולו חוץ מן הפתירו חוץ מן הפתירו מפני שהוי ספך על שול saber is not in me, so in the hero is benito. Als in the hero is hallo. Als in the hero is benito, hallo, over loka. דברים צריך אדם למד צריך ביסוי ערב שבת שמחה שחור איש הדברים צריך אדם למד צריך ביסוי ערב שבת חשכו יזרתם מרבתם עליתו אסנה יזרתם מרבתם עליתו אסנה אוי דברים צריך אדם לאמר Soyet Erev Shabbos Yitchasheko Torech Otam Loimar Soyet Erev Shabbos Yitchasheko Torech Otam Torech Otam Loimar Soyet Erev Shabbos Tofek hashecha, tofek eno hashecha. Tofek hashecha, tofek eno hashecha. En me yasrin savadri en maktilen etaker. Vi madliken etaner, vi madliken etaner. אבל מיצרן את אדמו"רים ומירדי את הימנים את
Well, we've been north, we've been south, now we're going a little to the east. We're now going to hear about cousin A.D. Garbacz. Cousin Garbacz was born in Rovno in Lithuania, and he was already singing in public by the age of 8. He received his education at the yeshivot in Novograd, Volinsk, and Rovno, and he was taught chazanut and voice production by several chazanim, including the great Zaydel Rovno. At the age of 20, he was appointed to his first post as Chazan Rishon at the Great Rovno Synagogue. During his army service, he learned to play the trombone, and through the intervention of the Rav of his community, while he did his army service, he was allowed to continue to serve as Chazan in Rovno. He was next appointed Chazan at the Beit Medrash HaGadol in Brest-Litovsk, where the Rav was the famous Rav Velvel Soloveitchik, the Brisker Rav. In 1928, cousin Garbacz came to England. One of his first engagements was to conduct services from the Yomim Noraim at the Pavilion, and there he was assisted by a choir of 40 men. At that time he was paid £100, which was a lot of money. In fact, I went online today and looked up, and it's equivalent to about £7,000 today. He was then appointed Chazan at the New Road Synagogue in the East End of London. He went down to Westcliff-on-Sea in 1930, presumably for a holiday, must have gone to shul. He was invited to lead Mincha, and the result of that was he was invited to become the Chazan of the shul. This is what he did, and he went with his wife, and he stayed in Southend-on-Sea for the rest of his career. During those years, he became the chutun of his own colleague, Rabbi Pinchas Shebson. Rabbi Shebson's son married cousin Garbacz's daughter. The cousin and the rabbi enjoyed a very close relationship, and Bernard, cousin Garbacz's son, told me that the cousin and rabbi made an agreement that irrespective of anything the congregation would say, at the end of each service, the chazan would tell the rabbi he'd never spoken better than today. The rabbi would assure the chazan that no chazan has ever davened better than he did today. Cousin Garbacz was a proficient pianist, and he composed many chazanische pieces. He retired for the first time in 1975 at the age of 76. But after 6 months, he was prevailed upon to continue to conduct services. The shul couldn't find anyone as good as he was to replace him. In the end, he had served Southend and Westcliff Hebrew congregation from 1930 for nearly 53 years. As well as being a very fine cousin, he was a warm and friendly man who was very much loved by his congregation. He typified the finest of the Anglo-Jewish ministry in combining the best of chazanut with the most caring and pastoral care of all his members. We're going to hear him sing Rom V'Nisso.
Magdiya Shepoli وهو كبير شفوالي موتي أسيرين أبويد يا نبيين أبويد يا نبيين ليوم يسبرت عليم موتي أسيرين ويد يا نبيين ويوم يصير ويوم يصير ضوالي ويوم اليمون بيش شباب العراق شباب شباب اليوم لكل اليوم ورحون وروح لقونا شيرا بسن خرابا بيوم روح
For our last cousin this evening, we're going back to Manchester. This is a cousin who many people said to me after the last program, why didn't you include him? Well, as you'll see, there are very, very many Chazanim, very, very many fine Chazanim to choose from. And I've left him here, and I've left him here to last. This is Solomon Hershman. He was the brother of the much better known Mordechai Hershman. Although I would say that very likely Solomon Hershman was known better in this country, although Mordechai was the one who did all the recordings. Solomon was born in Chernigov in Ukraine in 1893. He became a chazan at the Nozik synagogue in Warsaw. In May 1930, he became a chazan at High Crumpsall synagogue on the Berry Old Road in Manchester. He was very, very well known and very popular indeed in Manchester. And when people knew that the great cousin Hershman would be davening, the shul would be absolutely overflowing. Frequently on a Friday night, the shul was so packed that many of the men had to go upstairs to sit in the gallery. He stayed there in that shul for many years. He was the chairman of the Manchester's Agudat Chazanim, the Manchester Circle of Chazanim. His second wife, Catherine, was an accomplished pianist and used to accompany him when they rehearsed. He died in 1971 on the 28th of July. Here we're going to hear him sing Zochreinu L'Chaim.
Oder ich lois, eine Sach in sein mach schön. Gott soll ihm gedenken, denn liebt sich schenken. So dem Jür, dem Eine Tzadi Provences, Asher Yasetoim, Du weißt, der nicht nur ein Mensch in der Welt, viele was es los imois, alle zures, jois le poise, alle mores, l'ishol, in the tales, the boobes in the und Gebeten selicho umechilo Sehol shoin banile I werd euch im Haus a bissel geringer in alle Jiden werne sie
Well, that's all we have for this evening. As I mentioned earlier on, I do have many more recordings, and perhaps in the future we'll be able to celebrate some more of the Star Chazanim of the provinces. If anybody has any useful comment to make, not just to tell us when they heard these people, or anything to add, please, you can send in a message now. If Spencer, if we can perhaps unmute people, if anybody would like to make a useful comment, we'd be pleased to hear from you.
Right. And raise your virtual hand if you have something to say. Anyone? No,
that's fine. Excellent. Well,
yes.
As I say, I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you very much for joining us.
Gordon,
Spencer will tell us what's coming up next.
Gordon, would you like to unmute yourself? Can you unmute?
Alex.
Yeah. Trying
Go
to.
on.
I just wanted to thank Jeffrey and Spence on behalf of the European Cantons Association, partners in this series, of putting on a magnificent evening of pure chazanas. It shows you what I've missed and other people have missed for people who tune into this wonderful program. Kol hakavod to you, Rabbi Jeffrey. Thank you so much for giving people so much pleasure and continuing the line of liturgy that we have in the UK. It's always a pleasure, and it's wonderful to see. And it brought back some wonderful memories, because these chazanim, many of them I knew personally. If anybody does want to hear Chazan Herman, I'll just put it on here. There's a CD available, which is a studio recording which came out posthumously and brought out by his family in his honor. It's about an hour of recording. It is available from Mickey
online.
Hillman in Leeds. So
online.
If anybody likes it or would like a copy, great Hanukkah present. So just
thank you, Alex.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Right.
Thank you.
Right. If anyone
Malcolm, unmute yourself. Malcolm, unmute if you want to say something. Oh, go on.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear
Yes.
Oh, good. Cousin Herman was the predecessor of Hershman. Hershman was the predecessor of Cousin Herman, and I sang in the choir at High Crunsell Shul from 1953 when I was 11, probably for 2 or 3 years. And in those days, you used to get paid £0.50 a week, which was probably an awful lot of money in those days. I think the choir master was either a guy called Fireman or Fabian Gonski, who was a very well-known choir master.
Thanks very much.
Any final comment? No.
What's on next, Spencer?
Well, I'd like to thank you, Rabbi Jeffrey Schuster, for this fascinating and expert session dealing with the area of outstanding but long forgotten provincial Chazanim. I'm sure there is still more mileage in this topic, and I anticipate that we will return to it in the future. Thanks also to Tony Honigberg for downloading and preparing all the recorded music, and also to Elliot Golland for acting as facilitator. I would like, on behalf of the whole Edgware United community, to offer Elliot a hearty mazel tov on his engagement this week and wish him and his fiancée every happiness in the future. Our next cantoral session will be on Tuesday, the 31st of January in the Edgware Shul, when Cantor Elliot Alderman, our synagogue's former choirmaster, will discuss what's special about Spanish and Portuguese synagogue music, and with his experience of having had a foot in both the Ashkenazi and Sephardi musical world, will contrast the two. Our next session in the adult education program will be on Tuesday, the 10th of January, when we shall hear from Avi Son, our community development officer, and Tina Son about his grandparents and her parents, who were married for a record almost 84 years. It is entitled, It Started with a Date in 1928. Details of the Edgware sessions are placed on our website, www.edgwareu.com, or alternatively, you can contact our office@edgwareu.com, and ask to be placed on the circulation list for the adult education program. Recorded past sessions are on our Edgware US YouTube channel, and this session will be uploaded immediately to YouTube. Once again, thank you, Rabbi Schuster, for your presentation tonight.